All right. Hey, everyone, and welcome back. We love to really dig deep into the latest financial news and trends that are going to impact you. So get ready, because today we're taking a deep dive into something that's probably on a lot of your minds: Canadian mortgages. Specifically, what can we expect for 2025?
Well, to answer that, we're going to be looking at a Yahoo Finance Canada article from December 24th, 2024, titled Mortgage Outlook 2025. Canadians can expect lower rates, deals next year.
Okay, so right off the bat, the title seems pretty optimistic. Lower rates and deals. Who wouldn't want that? But let's unpack this a bit.
Definitely. It's important to understand the context behind these predictions and what they could really mean for you.
Right. Because as we all know, the last few years haven't exactly been a walk in the park when it comes to mortgages.
Absolutely. We've seen those interest rates climb and climb, and it's put a lot of pressure on borrowers, both new and existing.
So is this article suggesting we're finally going to see some relief?
Well, the article starts off with some good news about inflation. It says that inflation is back to the Bank of Canada's 2% target.
Okay, so inflation's down, but can you remind us, how does that actually connect to mortgage rates?
Sure. So when inflation is high, the Bank of Canada typically raises interest rates to try and cool things down, slow down spending.
Right, right.
But now that inflation is back under control, they actually have more room to lower those rates.
Okay, that makes sense. And the article does say that the Bank of Canada has already started cutting rates, which I guess is good news for anyone with a variable rate mortgage, right?
Exactly. Variable rates are directly influenced by the Bank of Canada's benchmark rate. So if that rate goes down, variable mortgage rates usually follow suit.
Okay, so variable rates are down. But hold on a sec. What about the folks with fixed rate mortgages? I mean, last time I checked, fixed rate mortgages are still pretty popular in Canada.
Oh, for sure they are. And that's a really important point to consider.
Because, what happens to those who are locked into a fixed rate? Especially those who are facing renewal in 2025.
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question. And, the article does acknowledge that there's potential for what they call renewal shock.
Renewal shock.
Basically, it means that people who locked in those super low fixed rates a few years back could be in for a rude awakening when they have to renew at potentially much higher rates.
Ouch, that doesn't sound fun.
Yeah, it's not ideal, but there could be a silver lining here.
Okay, I'm listening.
The article suggests that because there will be so many Canadians renewing their mortgages in 2025, lenders are probably going to have to fight tooth and nail to attract and keep those customers.
So more competition among lenders.
Exactly. And that competition could lead to some pretty sweet deals for borrowers.
Okay, so instead of just saying better deals, what could those deals actually look like?
Well, think about it. Lenders could start offering lower rates,
Hmm,
maybe even cashback incentives or flexible payment options. They might even help cover some closing costs.
that'd be nice.
Yeah, it's all about finding ways to entice borrowers in a competitive market.
So potentially some sweeteners for those facing renewal. But the article also mentioned something else that caught my eye: the elimination of the stress test for uninsured mortgages.
Right, that's another big change that could impact borrowers in 2025.
Can you remind us, what exactly was the stress test and what does removing it mean for people?
Sure. So the stress test was basically a way to make sure that borrowers could still afford their mortgage payments, even if interest rates were to go up significantly.
Oh, right.
So by removing it for uninsured mortgages, it means some borrowers might now qualify for larger loans than they would have before.
Hmm, that's interesting. So on the one hand, it sounds like good news, especially for first-time buyers who might have been struggling to get into the market.
It could definitely be helpful for them.
But on the other hand, doesn't it also raise some concerns about people taking on more debt than they can actually handle?
Oh, that's a valid point, and it's
Yeah.
definitely something to be mindful of.
Because just because you qualify for a bigger loan doesn't necessarily mean you should take it, right?
Absolutely. It's crucial for borrowers to create a realistic budget, factor in potential interest rate increases, and really make sure they can comfortably manage those payments.
So while eliminating the stress test could create more opportunities,
Yeah.
it also comes with a responsibility to borrow wisely.
Exactly. It's a powerful tool, but it needs to be used carefully and responsibly.
So we've got potential rate cuts, competitive deals for renewals, and a more relaxed stress test. Sounds like a pretty good recipe for a borrower-friendly mortgage market in 2025, wouldn't you say?
Well, on the surface, yes, but remember, there's always a bigger picture to consider. And this article doesn't shy away from some potential challenges ahead.
You're talking about the Trump wildcard, right? The article mentions his threat to impose tariffs on Canadian imports.
Yeah, that's the big one.
And that's a whole other can of worms. But before we dive into that, let's take a quick break. And when we come back, We'll unpack what those tariffs could mean for the Canadian economy and how they could impact anyone trying to navigate the mortgage landscape in 2025.
Sounds good. Okay, so let's talk tariffs. It's a big question mark hanging over the whole mortgage outlook for 2025.
For sure. I mean, it's hard enough trying to predict where interest rates are going to go, but then you throw in the possibility of a trade war with the U.S., and it feels like all bets are off.
Yeah, it definitely adds another layer of complexity.
So let's break it down. The article mentions Trump threatening to slap tariffs on Canadian imports.
Yeah.
What exactly does that mean? And how could it impact someone who's like, trying to figure out their mortgage situation?
Okay, so first off, tariffs are basically taxes on imported goods. So in this case, if Trump goes through with his threat, it would mean that certain Canadian products, like, lumber, aluminum, maybe even cars, would become more expensive for Americans to buy.
Okay, so that's bad for Canadian businesses trying to sell their stuff to the U.S.
Right. It makes their products less competitive, and it could hurt their sales. And when Canadian businesses start hurting, well, the whole Canadian economy can feel the pinch.
So how does that tie back to mortgages?
Well, the Bank of Canada's main job is to keep inflation under control and maintain a stable economy. If a trade war with the U.S. starts to damage the Canadian economy, it could force the Bank of Canada to reconsider its current strategy of cutting interest rates.
So even though rates are going down right now,
They could go right back up if things take a turn for the worse with these tariffs.
exactly.
Oh.
It's all about reacting to the economic conditions.
And those conditions can change pretty quickly depending on what happens with this trade situation.
Right, it's like trying to predict the weather months in advance. You might be planning for a sunny summer, but a storm could always roll in unexpectedly.
And those tariffs are like a potential storm brewing on the horizon.
Precisely.
So for someone with a variable rate mortgage,
All this uncertainty must be a bit unnerving. It definitely adds a level of risk, because their payments could fluctuate if rates start to rise again.
but what about people with fixed rate mortgages? Are they immune to this tariff turmoil? Well, they're somewhat insulated in the short term because their rates are locked in. But remember, those fixed rates are still influenced by the overall economic climate. If the economy takes a hit from a trade war, it could eventually push fixed rates higher as well.
Especially when those fixed-rate folks have to renew their mortgages.
Exactly. So no one is completely immune to the potential impacts of these tariffs.
Okay, so it sounds like we're in a bit of a wait-and-see mode. We need to watch how this trade situation unfolds and be prepared for the Bank of Canada to adjust course if necessary.
Exactly.
But even with all this uncertainty, the article still suggests that there could be some good deals to be had in 2025, especially for those who are renewing their mortgages.
Right. That's where the increased competition among lenders could really work in your favor.
So let's talk strategy. What advice would you give to someone who's facing mortgage renewal in 2025?
Well, first off, don't just automatically accept the renewal offer from your current lender.
Yeah, don't just sign on the dotted line.
Shop around, get quotes from multiple lenders, and don't be afraid to negotiate.
Because with all this competition, lenders are going to be eager to get your business.
Exactly. They might be willing to offer lower rates or throw in some extras to sweeten the deal.
So it really pays to do your homework and be prepared to haggle a bit.
Absolutely.
Now, let's shift gears and talk about the elimination of the stress test for uninsured mortgages. The article mentions this as another factor that could shake things up in 2025.
Right. It's a significant change.
So for someone who might not be familiar with the stress test.
Can you just quickly explain what it was?
Yeah.
And what removing it means for borrowers?
Sure. Basically, the stress test was a way to make sure that borrowers could still handle their mortgage payments, even if interest rates were to rise significantly.
Oh, right. Like a worst case scenario kind of thing.
Exactly. So by eliminating it for uninsured mortgages, it means that some borrowers might now qualify for larger loans than they would have before.
Okay, so that could be good news for some people.
Yeah.
Especially first-time buyers who are struggling to get into the market.
Right. It could give them a bit more purchasing power, but it also seems like it could be risky. I mean, just because you can qualify for a bigger loan doesn't necessarily mean you should take it.
You're absolutely right. It's crucial for borrowers to remember that just because they qualify for a certain amount doesn't mean they have to borrow the maximum. They need to consider their own financial situation, their long-term goals, and make sure they can comfortably handle those payments, even if interest rates were to rise.
So it's all about being responsible and not getting carried away with the excitement of potentially qualifying for a larger loan.
Exactly. It's like being given a powerful tool. You need to use it wisely and responsibly.
Okay, so we've talked about variable versus fixed rates, the potential impact of those tariffs. the competition among lenders, and the elimination of the stress test. But there's another piece of the puzzle that we haven't really touched on yet, and that's the psychological aspect of all this. I mean,
Yeah.
it's got to be tough for people to stay level-headed with all this uncertainty and conflicting information swirling around.
Oh, absolutely. It's easy to get caught up in the hype or to start panicking, depending on which headlines you're reading.
So how can someone navigate all this information and make a sound decision without letting their emotions get the best of them?
Well, the key is to focus on what you can control. You can't control what happens with those tariffs or what the Bank of Canada decides to do with interest rates.
Right.
But you can control your own financial situation. You can do your research. You can talk to experts, and you can make a plan that aligns with your own individual goals.
So it's all about taking a proactive approach
Yeah,
and not letting fear or speculation dictate your decisions.
exactly.
So what are some practical steps someone can take to manage their expectations and stay focused on their goals?
Well, first off, do a thorough assessment of your current financial situation. How much can you comfortably afford for a monthly mortgage payment? What's your risk tolerance? Once you have a clear understanding of your own finances, you can start exploring different mortgage options and talking to financial advisors to get personalized advice.
And don't forget about those crazy offers that Victor Tran, the mortgage broker, mentioned in the article. He seemed pretty optimistic that lenders would be pulling out all the stops to attract borrowers in 2025.
Right. So it's definitely worth shopping around and seeing what kind of deals are out there.
Don't limit yourself to just one lender or one type of mortgage.
Exactly. Cast a wide net and see what catches your attention.
It sounds like the key takeaway here is to be proactive and informed. Don't just sit back and wait for the perfect mortgage to magically appear.
Exactly. Got to be in the driver's seat.
I like that. So we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive, from the potential for lower rates to the uncertainty surrounding those tariffs. As we wrap up, what's the one piece of advice you would give to someone who's listening and feeling a bit overwhelmed by all this information?
That's a good question. I think the most important thing is to not make decisions based on fear or speculation.
Okay, so don't panic.
Right. Instead, focus on your own individual circumstances, your financial goals. What works for your neighbor or your coworker might not be the right fit for you.
That makes sense. There's no one-size-fits-all approach when it comes to mortgages.
Definitely not. And don't be afraid to seek out professional guidance. Talk to a financial advisor, a mortgage broker, even a real estate agent. They can help you navigate the complexities of the market and find a mortgage that aligns with your needs and goals.
It's like having a guide in a jungle, someone who knows the terrain and can help you avoid the pitfalls.
Exactly.
So while the 2025 mortgage landscape might seem a bit unpredictable right now, the key is to be prepared, be informed, and be proactive.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
And remember, a mortgage isn't just a financial transaction. It's a step towards a larger goal.
Right. Whether that's home ownership, financial security, or, building a future for yourself and your family.
Absolutely. It's about more than just the numbers. It's about what those numbers represent in terms of your dreams and aspirations. So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with this thought. Don't get lost in the weeds of interest rates and predictions. Keep your eyes on the prize, your personal goals, and use the information we've discussed today to make informed decisions, decisions that move you closer to achieving those goals.
Well said. Couldn't agree more.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the Canadian mortgage outlook for 2025. We'll see you next time. All right. Hey, everyone, and welcome back. We love to really dig deep into the latest financial news and trends that are going to impact you. So get ready, because today we're taking a deep dive into something that's probably on a lot of your minds, Canadian mortgages. Specifically, what can we expect for 2025?
Well, to answer that, we're going to be looking at a Yahoo Finance Canada article from December 24th, 2024, titled Mortgage Outlook 2025, Canadians Can Expect Lower Rates, Deals Next Year.
Okay, so right off the bat, the title seems pretty optimistic. Lower rates and deals. Who wouldn't want that? But let's unpack this a bit.
Definitely. It's important to understand the context behind these predictions and what they could really mean for you.
Right. Because as we all know, the last few years haven't exactly been a walk in the park when it comes to mortgages.
Absolutely. We've seen those interest rates climb and climb, and it's put a lot of pressure on borrowers, both new and existing.
So is this article suggesting we're finally going to see some relief?
Well, the article starts off with some good news about inflation. It says that inflation is back to the Bank of Canada's 2% target.
Okay, so inflation's down, but can you remind us, how does that actually connect to mortgage rates?
Sure. So